Okay. Good evening, everyone who is present with the live stream and those who are going to be with us for the replay. This is, I think, is our third live broadcast. My name is Rodney Davis. I'm the founder and CEO of Teach Life Skills. And we might be transitioning to new domain names very soon, so stay tuned for that. Today, we are going to a topic that we started 2 weeks ago, and we want to go a little bit further this week, and then next week we're going to finish it off before we have the live workshop on January the 10th. But as you see here, the topic we're going to cover today has to do with your internal GPS, the cost of caring. You know, those in the caring professions, we always talk about the cost of caring, and what this is all about is the stress, the things that you have to sacrifice in your own personal life when you deal with these kinds of professions. And there's always some baggage that it carries along with it when you have for other people. All right. And so what we breached last week and the week before was the fact that, my premise is we're trying to encourage teachers to pursue diversifying their income, and also to take care of some of the things that teachers have been telling me for the last 20 years are bottlenecks for them, namely workplace stress and burnout, right? So I'm trying to hit all three, and so we're going to move slowly into it. One of the things that come up every single income diversification for teachers is the fact that their plate is full already. Okay, so I realized that before we begin teaching per se about starting an online course business, which is the pathway that we are recommending teachers get into for building for themselves a substantial side income. But before they can do that, I really felt the need to, based on what teachers have been telling me, to address the burnout risk and the overwork situation and the stress from the business situation that so many teachers are faced with first, right? And what we talked about for the last couple of weeks was about that this is an inside job. That we, teachers don't really need another planner or get that much better with time management because they have to even operate. We have to look at our internal signals, keep a check on emotions, and take a second look at the things that we might have been sweeping under the rug about how we feel about all the things that we have to every day in all of the care professions, the caregivers. And, instead of brushing these things aside, take a pause, take a deep breath, get some calm, so you could give yourself some perspective. And so today we wanted to, before we go next week. All right. So as you see here, we're going to start off by talking a little bit about, the fact that, as I said here, the cost of caring has a cure. So before you can begin looking after building your course, let's get you, the teacher, into a calm space where you can do your job still, but at the same time, come away from the job having known that you did a good job, but that when the hour comes for you to switch to your own things, you can make that switch without left anything undone. Okay, so that's what we're on about evening. As you can see here, we've been talking about that burnout is basically an exhaustion of resources. And we're talking, of course, again, as about internal resources. In the industry or in the education profession, there's two things that we always have to deal with. There's the chronic stress that comes from just the everyday classroom situations, which most people climb on top of pretty easy. But the idea here is that there's a there's something that we tend to leave undone when we keep, like, if you find yourself every time going to sleep at night and you wake up the next morning and you're still not feeling that you've gotten all the rest that you needed, and so you start the next day not fully recovered, and then the next day you add a little bit more stress, and then it keeps adding as the days go by, and then the weekend comes and you think you're going to catch up on the weekend, and then Monday morning comes and you still don't feel, so you're in this perpetual state of not fully recovering. All right, and this is a slow and steady digress to the point of where we begin exuding symptoms of burnout. And we discussed all of those symptoms in the last couple of weeks. But here again, we wanted to revisit it and talk about the personal and the professional resources that you should make sure that you have available to you in order to to manage this stress and this constant I'm going to call it a layering of stress and things that just add up to make the situation worse if you don't take care of it. For myself, I remember coming into the teaching profession, as I was talking about 2 weeks ago, and I myself, I just experienced burnout to a very large extent because I've been doing the same exact thing in a different profession. So here I was coming from working at a drug rehab, which can be very demanding because you tend to pour all into the people you have to take care of. And so I had an administrative function and a care function as well. And both of these functions were very stressful because there were a lot of things that were not in place. And I had to ask myself at a particular moment whether I could able to sustain this. The answer, of course, was no. And so I had to leave that job, even though at the time I hadn't secured my next job as yet. So there I was, pretty close to burnout. No, the stress of the job and worrying about the paycheck and so on was less, but also now I have to think about getting a new job and so on. To make a long story short, as I mentioned in the last one, what ended up happening was I started a new job and I pretty much got the help that I needed to manage the stress from my previous job and also how to manage a new profession dealing with children in a classroom. But very quickly, I began realizing that some of my colleagues, the people around me, were exhibiting the same symptoms that I had just walked away from. And from way back then, I made a mental note that this is one of the things I want to do sometime in the future. I didn't know when, but I knew that I wanted to do something about it. After you spend 2 or 3 years in a classroom and you begin realizing what teachers go through, and even though it's not my chosen profession, I spent another 4 years in a classroom and I left the classroom with a very healthy respect for the things that teachers do, because I, for one, couldn't do a lot of them. And so when I got back to counseling and working directly with students, um, you know, to make a long story short, because of the process I had gone through when I just started the job, I found myself having a lot more spare time and be more relaxed and so on. And when you're like this, it shows. And it's my guess that as the time wore on, and the teachers around me were begin seeing how I dealt with certain things, some of them came to me a lot of times asking, "How do you deal with these kinds of students? Or how come you're so calm? Or how come when we send students to you, um, you know, um, they entered your office, and they were next to being very violent, and then they leave your office and they're calm. And I tell them, well, one of the things you have to understand is that I'm only working with 1 or 2 students. While they were in a classroom, that wasn't something that I was able to do. And I see teachers doing it all the time. So as I said, I developed a healthy respect for what teachers did. But on the other side of that equation, teachers began coming, seeking help for their own challenges in the classroom and sometimes for their personal lives as well. So that became something that was not on my task description, but I ended up doing a lot over the next 15 to 20 years. And that's just a part of my story. But here's what we're looking at. As we know, this is somewhat universal for teachers everywhere, in some places more than others. They're faced with a set of circumstances that tend to contribute to the stress that we keep referring to. No materials, do you recognize that one? Excessive paperwork is another one that was mentioned to me all the time, and one that I experienced myself in those years I was in a classroom. And there are times interpersonal communication between management or between colleagues, or sometimes with parents, or sometimes even with the children, is cause for stress. And so for some time, I began hearing teachers refer to their classroom as a war zone, right? And it's not everybody, but when you hear these kinds of things, you have to take note, right? Because to me, it's a cry for help. And what teachers were saying to me is that with all the things they have to deal with just regular teaching, some of the constraints that they were experiencing became a source of added stress, and they needed a way to approach it so that they can do their jobs and end up getting the kind of outcomes they were looking for at the end of the year. For me, the turning point in doing this, and I realized very quickly in helping some of the teachers I was working with, is that you have to move from a reactive place to an introspective place, and understanding, number one, what your own internal signals are, right? What we tend to do is, especially in a classroom setting that moves very fast, is there's the next class, and there's let's say you had a situation with a student or with a group of students, and the bell is going to ring in 5-10 minutes. So whatever happens is another set of students. So sometimes, without the situation being resolved, that group of students leave the classroom and another group comes in, and then maybe that one goes a little bit better, maybe it doesn't. But by the end of the day, what you end up sometimes it is with is a lot of these things that are unresolved. And as time wears on, the tendency for us to get more and more reactive gets higher, and it just contributes to the overall problem. And what I'm saying here is that what we want you to do is to understand that the solution to all of this has a lot more to do with looking inside and being more introspective, paying attention to those signals, taking a pause, and looking at the things that you've been brushing aside over the years, just because, or over the months or weeks or days, just because things are very hectic. And in a school setting, we know things move very fast. So awareness, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, is a big part of it. And what we want you to do is to set a long-term goal of growing your emotional competence and your emotional intelligence in order to be able to deal with these situations. I'm not talking on a day-to-day basis. I'm talking about getting yourself in a mental space where every day you can approach your work in a calm space and be able to deal with whatever the situation is. And when you go back home at the end of the day, you have reached a point where you're kind of taking care of the situation, and so it doesn't keep perpetuating itself into the future and into the weekend and into the end of the term, and so on and so forth, right? And I know a lot of you out there recognize what I'm talking about, because it's something that a lot of teachers have mentioned to me as over the years. So as a part of the solution, what we're saying is that you have to really get introspective, and so understand that we all come equipped with what I call your internal GPS, right? And that's just another way for describing what I describe as your self-awareness. And so what this is paying again very keen attention to your emotions as you react to things, as things happen, you pay attention to how it makes you feel. You take time on a regular basis to touch base with your needs, with your drives, with your dreams, with your aspirations, and all the things that you aspire to. You take time to take stock of your strengths, right? And also your internal triggers. What are the things that when you're confronted with them tend to trigger you? Okay, and I would dare say at this point that it's a good idea to find a way to jot these things down on a regular basis so that you can surface them from one place whenever it's that you have the time and the space and the help that you might need to take a good look at them and analyze and come up with solutions. Without awareness, the feeling that we get, if I may, I'd like to describe it as a sinking feeling because things are unresolved for too long and there doesn't seem to be any end in sight and it keeps piling up. And your immediate reaction is to keep sweeping the things under the rug and they keep piling up. And there's this vague sense of sinking, right? And when somebody comes to me and tell me they've hit that point, that's when I begin thinking, okay, here's somebody that is at high risk of burning out unless we take action very quickly. Self-regulation, as we mentioned, is a cure. So after you've taken stock of where you are, after you've documented and journalized and taking an honest look at where you are with these things. The next step, of course, is finding a way to mitigate it, right? To find a handle on regulating self. Okay, what happens in the classroom with a lot of people of us, this happened to me a couple of times, even though I sometimes I hesitate to admit it, but it happened to me at least once that I can remember. When we become so reactive in a classroom setting that we react in a way that when we look back at it, we weren't very proud of because we know we're teachers and we know we're not supposed to react in a certain way. But as humans, again, if with the backdrop of what we've just been talking about, we fall into reaction, and so that becomes the unfortunate thing that we you know have sad stories to tell. All right, so the skill to control impulses, regardless of what the stress situation is something that we do when we talk about developing emotional intelligence. And it's a practice, right? It's not a switch that you turn on. It's something that you have to work on a regular basis as you continue your journey. All right. So even though we're going to be talking to you beginning in somewhere in mid-January about building that side income, and even though we're telling you that we have to take care of this first, understand from now that it's not a switch. It's something that you're going to be developing along with your business. All right. And it's something that you have to set long-term goals around and get better at as the time goes on. Okay. And hopefully we're going to be able to create a community that you could come to, where we could discuss these issues and delve very deeply into them. To go a little bit further, aborting the stress response that creates these situations that sometimes we're not proud of after we look at how we handled it. This is one that a lot of teachers know already, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it, but it's something that I used to use with students a lot. And it's just about finding a way to put some distance between the trigger and the response, right? Because most people think that somebody else might have caused you to react in a certain way. And the reality is that there's a space that you can expand between the trigger and the response, okay? And there are a lot of different ways of doing this. One way that we have here is just stopping for a minute and inhaling for a short little breath of time. If you could find a way to get 4 seconds in, take a deep breath, hold your breath for I'd say 4 seconds, and then exhale for the same 4 seconds. We call it box breathing for those of you who haven't heard about it before. Just a simple technique like that sometimes will give you the space that you need between the trigger and the response. And so in the moment, this becomes a very useful tool to get some calm so that we are not as reactive as we can become with all the stress that's added on top of us on a day-to-day managing classroom situations. On a longer term, one of the things that I talk about to teachers a lot is about your daily habits around your work, right? Teachers are very caring people, and we have deadlines that we have to meet as teachers, right? So what I see is a very common practice is around taking work home. This is something that almost all teachers do, right? Especially around exam time. And I'm going to challenge you to work at this, to set a goal that at some point in the near future you're no longer going to be taking work at home. Now, I know there's going to be exceptions, but if you can set a goal for yourself that at the end of a certain period of time, all of the work that you have to do will be done, let's say before 5 o'clock. I'm just choosing that as an arbitrary time. Even if you can't get it all done on the job, at least have a cutoff time by which you know you're going to be doing shifting gears and calming down and coming out of the whole work process, and then taking time for yourself to climb up the stairs on another but just to gather your energy and to enter your personal space, right? This is something that I myself struggle with to this day, right? And I find that when you don't have hard edges around the end of your work day, it bleeds into your personal life, and the next thing you know, it adds to the whole situation that we were talking about at the beginning of this broadcast. All right, so that is one I'd like you to take a note of. We're going to be delving more deeper into it as time goes on. So how close are you to burnout yourself? We've reached the end of what I wanted to do today, because next week we want to look at some solutions to this. All right. I have online a way to, it's a rudimentary assessment of where your risk level is, where burnout is concerned. So what I'm going to do is ask you guys to take the assessment. It's not a scientific test, mind you. All I intended to do here with this assessment is to surface the things that you already know you've been sweeping under that rug, as we've been talking about, so that we can begin looking at them again, right? Because I have the sense, again, from dealing with teachers for many years, that you already know what these issues are, but because you didn't have a path towards solving the problem, we just keep, sweeping it under the rug and leaving it there. And so what this assessment is all about is just trying to surface them in your awareness once more. And as we continue, we're going to be able to discuss them in our community and to deal with them in a good way. So what I want you to do is, again, even for those of you who will only be looking at this broadcast as a replay, first, before you take the assessment, we want you to make sure that whatever hardware you're using, whether it's your phone or your laptop or wherever, log into your Google account first. And then what you see on the screen, you're gonna make sure you go there, and it's basically a Google, one of those Google sheets that we ask people to select a little survey. And at the end of that process, what it's going to do is give you a feedback as to how near you are to burnout. Right? And I know already that this is just going to be a confirmation of what you already know. We just want you to raise your awareness so that as we continue with the process of getting you to a point where you feel that you can actually take on, worry about whether you're doing your job properly, knowing that you're giving the children everything that you can, and that you're also giving yourself everything that you can. So all you have to do is to visit the site that you see here, and then take the assessment, and then from there, that is going to lead you to the next step. All right. So any questions that come up? I'm looking here and I don't see any questions in the YouTube link. So I'm hoping that we get a lot more questions as the weeks go by. And what we intend to do is to turn this broadcast into more of a Q&A format, where when I log on here and I go live, what I'm going to see is a barrage of questions, and I'm going to have somebody that's going to be feeding me with them, and then so all I can do is just answer them on the fly, because I think that's the way how we should be building our community, by being very responsive to the concerns that come up from the audience. So if you're looking at this from the replay, take the burnout assessment, come back here, make your comments, ask questions before we do the next one. We're going to be doing this again, I think, on Thursday, the 8th is the next one. And for that one, we're going to be taking a look at what's the next step, right? So we took a final look today at the whole problem and the stress and all of that. And so even though we went into it a little bit today, we're going to go a little bit deeper next week about what you do about it and why you have to do it before you begin in earnest building a side income business. Okay, so that's what I had for today. Let me change this back to come out of the presentation. And since we have a few more minutes, what I wanted to do was to revisit one or two questions that we did get from one of the broadcasts. I think that one actually came in of all things, that one came from TikTok, right? Where it was like a rephrase of the question we just went into about what are we going to do if we feel like we have our time is already stretched to the limit, and yet we want to diversify our incomes, right? So the question that was asked to me, if I remember correctly, was um, the fact that we have AI on stream, and teachers are getting a lot of controversy coming from parents, coming from management, coming from the children themselves. And a lot of teachers don't know exactly where this is going to go because, on the one hand, they see where they having AI can be a big help to their teaching, but at the same time, it's a huge challenge. And so the question that was asked was if there's any way that they can leverage AI to assist with the whole problem of building an online business. I cannot answer that in any comprehensive way in one setting. What I can say is that all the pundits from the industry tell me that we should look at everything AI as it being in its infancy. And so how we look at AI today is unlikely to be the way how we look at it just 3 years down the road. All right. So whatever you see happening today, don't take the stance that, okay, this is the direction it's going to go in indefinitely. I encourage people to keep an open mind, try things out, um, make sure you're discussing these things with management, with your colleagues, do your own research, and definitely try things out. But understand that on the long term, what you see happening now is not going to be the way how it stays. Okay. Um, to answer the question directly about whether or not AI will help in the content generation for online courses and so on, definitely it will. But I think the ways in which it does so will change as as the technology develops as well. We now see a lot of things happening with people building agents and GPTs and all of these automations and bots and so on coming on stream. And so I'm pretty sure they're going to play a major role. But I don't know how important that stuff is going to remain 5 years from now, because if everybody has access to the same technology, then that no longer gives you a competitive edge because it's accessible to everybody. My guess, if I'm honest, is that I think what's going to become more and more valuable in the online course space is that personal touch, right? The stories that you bring from your classrooms, from your daily lives, from your own personal experience, and that hands-on part of you is what is going to become more and more valuable because content itself is so easy to generate. And so what I see happening is us developing and growing communities where connection is the currency, right? And information becomes, the low bar that everybody has to get over, and we're going to get over it pretty quickly. And then what you bring to the table is your own personality, your own ways of dealing with things and expressing yourself. And the last thing I want to mention about that is my experience with teachers is that they're the most resourceful set of people I have ever worked with. And you see the grays in my hair, right? I've been around. I've worked in a lot of different industries in a lot of different verticals, and I have found no group of people as resourceful as teachers. You guys come up with things on the fly, and again, because I have a lot of experience outside of education as well, I can tell you that there's something very entrepreneurial about that. Um, what a business person might spend 2, 3 years trying to develop, I have seen teachers come up with and execute in a matter of moments after they problem presented itself. And my message to you is that you can monetize that, and it's something that's instinctive to you, and all we have to do now is to give you the marketing parts of it and how you turn that into a business. And so, as I said, beginning in mid-January, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're just dealing with the things that are in front of you right now, so that going down the road, um, you have some solutions to that as well. So, without any further ado, I'm going to begin signing off. And once again, leave your questions. We're going to be here again next week, Thursday. I hope I'm being correct here. Let me give a quick check. I think it's on the 8th. Yeah, Thursday, the 8th of January. Is that correct? Yeah, that's correct. 6 o'clock. And bring your questions. Share the link with others, and then let's see if we can get this community growing. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you all being here, even if it's just a replay, and see you next week.